I read part 1 of The Hero of Ages, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to make some predictions based on the information I already have from the first 100 pages or so from this book, plus the previous 2 books that I read as well, on what I think is going to happen over the course of this book, and just generally talk about what has happened so far in this book as well. And out of the 3 books, so Mistborn, The Well of Ascension, and Hero of Ages, I think this one has got me the most excited in the first 100 pages or so. And that's because of the level of momentum that's come from the previous 2 books. And I'll explain. So what I think is our 2 main characters, Vin and Elend, they already have a level of urgency and clear direction as to what they at least believe they need to be doing from the get-go of this book. And those are the 2 that drive our story forwards. Now in Mistborn, Vin was just living her life, so obviously slowly things had to be introduced. In the second book, Elend was very unsure of himself. He was really trying the democracy aspects of things and really trying to just slow things down and get it right. Whereas at the start of this book, they both have a clear understanding of what they need to do, or what they think they need to do, and how they need to do it. So the pace is quick, it's urgent, it's exciting, and everything that's happening feels like it's directly tied to the end of the story. So it had me absolutely enthralled, and I read the first 100 pages in no time at all. So the first topic that I wanted to jump on was ruin and prosper. Yes, that's right. I just called preservation prosper. And I wanted to take this moment to apologize, because not only am I going to do that right here, but I'm also going to do that for the entire duration of the video. And although prosper isn't a million miles away from preservation, as a fan, I know it is frustrating when somebody gets names so obviously wrong so regularly. So I apologize. I'm going to do better in the next video, but it is far too late for me to go back and refilm it, because I've already read further on into the book now, and refilming it, I would already know what happened further on when I'm filming my predictions from further back, which would be unfair to do. So we're just gonna have to deal with it. I'm sorry, I'll do better next time. Back to the video. So I think one of the characters voices this, is ruin needs something. It needs something to take it to the next level. And in fantasy, normally what happens is these type of forces, they need like a physical body. And that, I don't think ruin needs a physical body necessarily, because the force itself has achieved so much without having a physical body. But it's searching for something. And I think that something is the atium. I think the atium is obviously extremely important. It's been important from the beginning. And I think it's searching for that atium, and it could be for a really mundane reason, like it needs the atium to complete its inquisitors to the highest standard. Like if these inquisitors get an atium spike as well, they're going to be nigh on undefeatable. Or maybe it needs the atium so that it can finally overpower Prosper, or maybe it's planning on using the atium for another unknown reason, or potentially it just wants to build its body out of probably the coolest metal. So again, of course, the atium is really important, and I think it's also going to be important in deciding the future of the world, and ruin and prosper's kind of battle against each other as opposing forces. What is the atium going to be used for? I still don't know. But as I've said in every video since we discovered Duralumin, and I'm going to say it again because I don't want anyone to miss it and say that I didn't say it, because I'm so certain, and by certain I mean like I'm 50% sure, that what is going to happen is that someone's going to burn atium with Duralumin, and we're going to get some crazy effects where they can see really far into the future and make subtle changes now that will take them to the direction that they need to go in. I think that would be really cool. But yeah, Duralumin times atium, that's going to be important at some point. I've said it in every video, I just want to keep up the trend, because when it happens, I'm going to be so buzzing. So from the looks of things, between Ruin and Prosper, we're getting a kind of yin and yang vibe. And the reason I say that is hemalurgy is when you essentially steal power from somebody else, is what it seems like, via murdering someone with the spikes. So you take their allomantic powers and push that into somebody else, and then they keep a hold of that. So via the metals, you seem to have stolen somebody else's ability. So you're putting that into the metal and then burning the metal, is my understanding of it so far. We haven't had it properly explained yet. And then allomancy, which seems to be the power of Prosper and the mists, is obviously you utilizing the metal, you're burning the metal to get that power. So it's like a trade-off there. The terrace's power, which is feruchemy, that one seems to be the balance in the middle. So along that thinking, I believe that ruin and prosper are like the yin and the yang almost, but there has to be a balance in the middle. And I think that there's the third god or a third power, and that is what the terrace's religion was. And I don't know why it would have been suppressed. I don't know why the Lord Ruler would have killed it. I don't know that aspect, but it just feels like, because Sazed is so depressed and so sad and he's lost his faith, like Sazed, that's like a clear setup for him rediscovering the terrace faith, and that faith being a third one of these gods that can, if you know Pokemon, right, this is going to be a strange reference, but they can Rayquaza the situation, which is like one of the powerful Pokemon that kind of is like the mediator between two others. I'm going off on a tangent here, but we're looking for the Rayquaza of this book, and I think the Terrace's god is going to be the one of balance, because feruchemy is so fair. Like basically you put in and then you get that exact thing back. So it's like a fair trade-off, it's a balance. So it would only make sense that their god would restore balance to everything. But a big question is, how did Ruin get in the well already? Because the Lord Ruler, I don't think, put Ruin there because he had the opportunity to either release Ruin or not, right? And Prosper was already out and about, because Prosper is the mists, it would seem, and the mists are the deepness, right? So we were already lacking something pretty clearly, and I think the Lord Ruler might have missed something as well, even though he clearly knows a lot more than we do now. And I'm really excited to learn more about the Lord Ruler and what he did know. It must have been such an interesting dude. But yeah, how did Ruin get in the well? Did Prosper put him there? And if Prosper put him there, then, you know, things weren't really prospering when the mists were just about. So it doesn't really live up to his name, which would suggest that there's a third option. There has to be a third option. We can't go back to what was before the Lord Ruler's time, you know, otherwise it's just cyclic and it's just one of them dominating and ruining everything in a go. So Prosper doesn't seem so prosperous to me right now, and I have a lot of unanswered questions, which is the point at this point. So that makes sense. But I have been thinking about the voices, and in this book, especially in every book, but at the start of this book as well, Reem is talking to Vin a lot. And I started to think, so Vin's earring was really important at the start of the book. It was made a big deal of. I remember in the very first video, I said this earring is going to be important because it was just had a weird amount of mentions and a weird amount of page time, and that's classical fantasy setup. And then in the well itself, the earring got like super hot, and she had to take it out while she was in the well, which meant either it did something, it reacted with Ruin in some way or with that power in some way. Plus, she's always been wearing it, and she gets Reen's voice in her head all the time. So I was thinking maybe what's talking to Vin is actually Ruin or Prosper, or maybe this third god, which I've completely invented, but might be a real thing as well. But something is talking to Vin, and she believes that it's actually just Reem's voice. And even when I wrote my notes for this, I wrote down, could it not be Reem's voice? And then the next thing that Reem said, I was like, oh, actually, you know, it must be his voice. And then the thing he said after that, I was like, wait, no, that doesn't even make sense, because it's no longer things that Reem has said to her. That she's not just directly remembering his quotes now. She's hearing new things, but in his voice. And I think she's just rationalizing what she's hearing. So I think either Ruin, Prosper, or someone else is talking to her via her earring now. I don't know how, but I think maybe if I learn more about hemalurgy, I believe it's called, the third type of magic that seems to be attributed to Ruin, I think if I learn more about that, that'll make sense somehow. On to my second topic, the Kandra. So the first thing I want to say is props to Sanderson for bringing in so many very, very strange creatures and weird, abstract cultures and worlds, but it didn't feel overwhelming at the time. And he's slowly bled those in and allowed us just to focus on Vin to begin with. And then well, really we first focused on the culture, so the scar and then the different levels that were involved. And then we were slowly bled into the idea of allomancy and then to Mistborn, and then, you know, from there. I just think he's handled the information really well. And initially, you do get some information dumps for sure, but overall, I feel like I've really understood what I'm supposed to have understood by that point, and I just want to give props to Sanderson for that. So, the Kandra. What we've learned is that they're a lot more complicated than we first thought, and it appears the Lord Ruler made the first ones, and it also appears that the Lord Ruler, or an Allomancer maybe, or maybe someone with Feruchemy, because obviously the Lord Ruler had both, or maybe he was able to do Hemalurgy as well. Maybe, well, no, one of those was used to make the Kandra, and I think it was Hemalurgy. And the reason why is because they talk about like rods being in some of the Kandra, and the only thing we know that would make sense that way is Hemalurgy. So I think in some way, Hemalurgy is what was being used to create the Kandra, but Hemalurgy maybe by the Lord Ruler. But they also, the Kandra also said that the Colossus and something else are beasts of ruin, but they were beasts of something else. So I would assume that they're beasts of Prosper somehow. It's all very confusing, but maybe the Kandra hear the voices of Prosper in their head. Potentially, I don't know. I'm reaching here a little bit, but the Kandra are going to be really important. And here's a couple of reasons why. Number one, big steel platform. We already know that ruin can't change something that's in steel. And we learned that from when Quan had written in the Obligators, like headquarters, so to speak, had written his stuff down, and they said if it's not written in steel, then we can't trust it. Big thing called steel. Speaking of the word trust, the trust is inside of it. It wasn't told exactly what that was, but I think that the atium is hidden inside of that, because it would just be perfect. Like, it has to be hidden somewhere, right? It has to be hidden somewhere. And I don't know why the Lord Ruler would give the atium to them, but it's clear that the atium is so important. It could damage anybody. Like, it seems like it could be the end of Ruin, the end of Prosper, it could be the end of the Lord Ruler when he was about. Like, it was such an important metal to this global fight. I don't know how, but it just is. So, where was I going with this? So, yeah, he definitely hit it. Well, he didn't definitely, but I think he hit it with the Kandra. And the reason for that is because they talk about the resolution. And there's no more details given, but the resolution is obviously, it's the clues in there, it's the solution, the resolution to the issue at hand. And the Lord Ruler was clearly making preparations for Ruin and Prosper to be out and about doing their thing. So maybe that is like the nuke somehow. The atium is the nuke, but the solution is the atium. The atium is the trust is in the steel thing, and the first Kandras know about it because they're very mysterious and up in their den. So I might be miles off there, and I probably sound like a conspiracy theorist, but it's called trust. It's called trust. They don't really know what it is other than the first ones, and no one would think to look there. Not a single person would think to look there. They think they're going to find it in the two cities now. And that's classic, right? That's classic Sanderson, to have you chasing something. And then in part 4 and part 5, you realize you're chasing the wrong thing entirely for the entire duration. Like, that's the very Sanderson thing to do. So, overall story, I think that in the two cities, I think it's Fadrex and then Urchia? I'm sure somebody will correct me, as they always do in these videos with the pronunciations, because I get a lot of them wrong. I think the preoccupation is going to be with those two things, and I think they're going to find some important stuff in both of them. But yeah, the atium, what they're finally looking for, is actually going to be in the Kandra's homeland. And as I said before, a big theme of this series is belief, and gods and belief systems have been prevalent throughout the duration, mainly with Sazed as the orator for that, for us. But the Lord Ruler set himself up as a god. Ruin talks about himself as a god. I wouldn't be surprised if Prosper talks about themselves as a god. And Sazed as constant talk about religion, and now his lack of faith in religion is all set up for him to rediscover belief. And that's why I think that the Terrace's religion will give us a new, more balanced middle ground. And I just can't think of why the Lord Ruler would have got rid of that. completely, because that was the first thing he got rid of, right? Was their religion. Maybe because like he set himself up as that balance in the middle, keeping the mists back, keeping Ruin where he was. But maybe there was someone else doing it before. Maybe that's all that happens. Maybe a new hero of ages comes in and becomes that balanced god in the middle and takes on all three of the Hemalurgy, Allomancy and Feruchemy at the same time. And that's what allows them to be balanced. I don't know. It's Sanderson, so maybe. One thing I will say is, as I mentioned earlier, is I'm really sad the Lord Ruler died so early. I know it had to happen for the story to progress, but I would definitely read about his ascension, even if it was like a mini book. I'm sure there's a different word for that. Even if it was a novella, I would read that. I think he must have been such an interesting person. And it sounds like he was a very one-dimensional person, just an angry youth who Quan could trust to not give up the power, and that was it. He was just a very jealous and selfish person. And to go from that to all of a sudden being God of the universe must have been a crazy progression for that person. So I would read that. Maybe we do get that at some point in the Cosmere. I don't know. I don't really know in what direction we go after this. One final thing I will say is I think Marsh is going to be our MVP again somehow. He was the MVP in my opinion of the first book, like him taking out the spikes of the Inquisitors at the perfect time. I think he took like 7 of them out just before Vin battled the Lord Ruler. That was clutch. Like there's no way that her and Marsh were going to defeat the Lord Ruler plus 7. So that was massive. He was obviously very, very absent in the second book. He was off being, I don't really know what he was doing, but he sounds like he was under the direction of Ruin for the entire time, obviously because most of the Inquisitors are. So he just appeared at the end and tried to kill Sazed, which isn't very, MVP material, but we know why now. And now in this book, I think right at the end of this part, he makes the resolution that he's going to just pretend to have given up, and then at the last second, he's going to pull his own spike out the back. So, and it's been shown that he is going to be very important to Ruin's plans because he has more spikes in him than any other Inquisitor. So he might arguably be the most powerful being currently outside of Ruin itself, and maybe Prosper potentially, because of the amount of spikes he has inside of him. He might be faster, stronger than Elend and Vin now. And finally, who is writing the preface for each of the chapters? My money is on Sazed. He loves to write things down. And the person who loves to write things down in the fantasy story always ends up being the person who wrote the book or wrote down like the diary stuff, It seems to be anyway. So I'd be very surprised if it wasn't Sazed, but we'll see. If you've enjoyed this, please like and subscribe to my channel. I did this with all of the Wheel of Time and then Joe Abercrombie's First Law, and I'm going to be doing it with a bunch of books moving forwards as well. But we'd love to have along for the ride. Thank you. Have a good day.